WATT.
Yes.
TEF. Oh, no.
And welcome
Plug in here.
to the Down in Front podcast. How's it going, everybody?
Yeah.
We are pumped. We are here. My name is Warren. I'll be your host this evening from the lovely, lovely South Miami Beach area. And I'm with a bunch of my friends, and we are going to be talking about, and what we normally do talk about here on the Down in Front podcast is a bunch of movies, TV shows, nerdy stuff, and just anything and everything that we want to do. So I'm going to go and toss it around, but before we actually kind of introduce everybody else who's here, we are going to be talking about Darren Aronfsky's newest film, Mother, which just came out in theaters and it is really getting a lot of different reviews, especially a lot of things on Twitter and social media is just all over the place. So we were really excited and really pumped to kind of talk about it, just to share some of our thoughts. So before we get into the actual entire sort of episode, I'm going to introduce one of my best friends in the world, the mouth of the South, Bradley. How's it going, Bradley?
But what am I doing? I am drinking the gentleman Jack. As usual, clinky, ice and a drinky. What I've been watching. What I've been watching recently is a couple of weeks ago I finished the final season of Orphan Black, and I've watched all 5 seasons of this show on BBC America. And I have to say, looking back at this is going to be, I think, a show that's going to be appreciated for many years to come, even though it wasn't like hugely popular. It definitely built its own fan base, and they were able to approach subjects in a very fresh way, but also realistic way, like a lot of their sci-fi. You could definitely see would be happening, today. It's all about genetic engineering and cloning and things like that. But they also had great characters, and it was definitely a show to watch just to see one actress, Tatiana Maslany, play a dozen different characters in very unique different ways, and she knocks it out of the park. She's just a powerhouse of acting throughout this whole series. If you ever get a chance to watch it, I definitely recommend binging it. It is definitely a good ride. It does get kind of muddy with its storyline a couple seasons in. But it's always good to see just what she does. But she also has a really good supporting cast to help her out as well.
Cool.
Other thing I was watching was BoJack Season 4. And just some quick comments on that. With BoJack, I love BoJack. I think it's, for an animated show about anthropomorphic animals, it is probably some of the most earnest, heartfelt human condition analysis out there, and I feel like this season might be its weakest, but there's still some amazing work in it. I think one of the weak points is BoJack doesn't feel like front and center to me this season, but they have some amazing storylines for other characters, like Princess Caroline has an amazing season arc, and also BoJack's mom. And just that side of BoJack's family, the Sugarmans, the Sugarmans. That it's interesting to see not only just what his mom went through, but just history of that genealogy and what may actually speak about who BoJack is. And then also always this show is awesome for its visual side gags, and it's dedication to continuity. There's one billboard that says Uncle Cuck at the very beginning of the season, and it's just a shady guy watching 2 people in a bedroom make out. they end the season with a billboard in the back saying "Son of Uncle Cuck," and this little kid wide-eyed at the kitchen table while two people make out in the back. So you got to give it up that the creators have that attention to detail throughout the whole season.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I heard definitely a lot about the show, so I still haven't a chance to kind of take a look and kind of watch it, but it's definitely on my list. So I'm super pumped, and as always, thanks for hanging out. I'm going to toss it over to the mochiest of the mochas that I've ever known in my life. It's kind of weird because I only know one of them. Mike, how's it going, man?
It's going great. It's going great. I've never been this mocha in my life, and I feel good about it.
Yeah, all that hot weather? I don't know. What are you sipping on, and what you been watching?
Well, as for what I'm sipping on, I'm running strong on the Apothic train. Mm-hmm. As listeners to the pod will know, I've drank Apothic for pretty much every episode for the past 4. This time I switched it up. I'm drinking a nice Apothic White. Gone are the days of the dark and sultry. Now it's all about light, cold, and crisp. But it's pretty tasty. It's going down way too fast, so hopefully I maintain myself throughout this recording. And as for what I've been watching, I had the pleasure last night of watching a new Netflix comedy special starring Jerry Seinfeld called Jerry Before Seinfeld. It's a solo stand-up special where he uses a stand-up comedy routine to sort of go through his history as a comedian, growing up in New York and what it was like going from his very, very early toddler age childhood to becoming an adult. Jerry Seinfeld is one of the legends of comedy, in my opinion. He has been in the game for so long and is just he's so funny to me in a way that a lot of comedians aren't. He's not a clean comedian. He doesn't curse and he doesn't use dirty language, but he's not necessarily a clean comedian. It's just not his style of humor. And somehow, all these years later, after my first time watching Jerry Seinfeld stand up, back in the early 90s, maybe late 80s to today, he still has the ability to just, in a really really break down concepts that we deal with every day in the world to really simple truths that just make me laugh my ass off. And I was worried about the special because he hasn't done a stand-up special in so very long. And it's just very clear that comedy is just who he is. He didn't miss a beat. He was a consummate professional, and it was a great watch. So if you're a fan of stand-up comedy or a fan of Jerry Seinfeld, definitely watch Jerry Before Seinfeld on Netflix.
Cool. I mean, as always, thanks. I'm definitely going to be checking that out, especially because I know there's so many fans from Seinfeld and so many parts of that particular kind of comedic sort of approach. That's definitely it should hopefully hear more about it. I actually haven't heard it and seen it, so that's actually going to be pretty cool. I'm going to check that out. So, as always, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
And then I have literally the sexiest man on earth, even above Charlie Hunnam. I have Mike Blewett. How's it going, Mike?
Whoa.
What's below Paul Rudd? We must make
yes,
that
below Paul Rudd. Yeah, above Charlie Hunnam, below Paul Rudd. Wicked Good Games, come at me. What's up?
Right, so I'm drinking water because I was in the South in Louisiana for the last 5 days, and I did nothing but drink beer, and it was awesome. And yeah, I didn't see anything for the last week because I was in Louisiana. It was awesome. Patriots won, go Pats.
And he's the worst. So thanks, Mike. Not as happy having you on, but as always, it's great to see your face. Perfect. And I am Warren, your host of this evening. I am currently sipping on some hotel wine. It's called Copa de Vino. It's literally cup of wine.
That's so amazing.
Yeah. So I was like, yeah. So I am drinking a cup of
Copa de Vino was the second single from Los Ketchup. So.
Oh, there you go.
Los Ketchup.
A Copa de Vino Merlot, and I have some Copa de Vino Cabernet Sauvignon on standby. We never know what's going to happen tonight. And I've been actually watching, much like Mike Blewett, I've been traveling a bunch, so I've actually been watching my normal ones. All my anime episodes, and I know me and sort of Mocha kind of talk about it, but I have been binge reading a lot of other manga episodes and a lot of manga chapters and stuff like that, and really get into my nerd on all that stuff. So I'm super pumped to kind of talk about that, whereas Hunter x Hunter and One Piece and even on Attack on Titan, and Mocha even dropped a bomb that literally blew my mind while I was heading back to Boston. So I'm super pumped to kind of talk about a little bit more about that a little bit later on. Just kind of watching everything else and really watching a lot of sports too. But I'm super pumped. I'm really excited to kind of get some thoughts and some theories on Mother by Darren Aronfsky. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to get into our full actual episode, but we will be spoiling the actual movie. But before we do that, I do want to kind of toss a question to the group here and say, what were you expecting kind of going into this movie, especially with you've done movies like The Black Swan and Requiem for a Dream? Like, what was a couple thoughts that you had from listening, hearing the movie called Mother and kind of going into it?
I had next to nothing. I knew Aronofsky was a famous director. I didn't really know what he was known for, and I watched no trailers. I didn't even know Javier Bardem was in it. I knew it was Jennifer Lawrence, and that's it. And that's pretty much all you needed to know.
Pulling the old Warren. I like it. Bradley?
Yeah, I've been a fan of Aronofsky's ever since Pi was released, and when I heard about this movie, I mean, I was definitely super interested to see what he's coming up with next, because the last movie I saw of his was Black Swan. I thought that was amazing, and it was really, I had a really interesting thought process while watching this movie. First when I was watching it, I was like, hey, is this kind of like a metaphor for home ownership and the hardships of home ownership? To be very honest, I think that's because a lot of my friends right now, they bought and sold houses recently, and all their stories are like nightmare fuel, pretty much, about that process. And as I started to watch the movie a little bit more, I thought it was like a twisted take on Princess Mononoke. So it just a very ecological, conscious tale. But ultimately, started to think that the movie was about the creative process and just about the pragmatism of just normal everyday life, like going home, having a routine, versus, hey, if you're a creative person, you definitely have to take risk, and you got to actually put yourself out there and maybe create some chaos, which may cause a lot of that stability to break and fall. And where do you pick up and continue to maintain the balance of stability and the creativity?
Oh, cool. Mocha.
Yeah, I have been a fan of Aronofsky since Requiem for a Dream. That movie was probably the first time in my young adult life where I realized that I could be completely disturbed and bothered by a film and absolutely love every single minute of it. I've seen Black Swan. I haven't had the good fortune of seeing Pi, but I knew coming into this movie that it was going to, at the very least, have some imagery or some moments that would just be very bothersome to me, or to any well-adjusted, non-psychopathic individual. And this movie just tried really hard to prove me right. There were a lot of things in it that were just confusing and uncomfortable, and one of the most downright disturbing scenes I've seen in the film, which we'll get into later in our post-spoiler section. But he lived up to his name, I feel like, in terms of that. Some might argue that he tried to reach a little bit further than his name, but we can get more details into that later on. But yeah, that's where I stand with Aronofsky's work.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, Darren Aronofsky, really, much like you, kind of chime on Mocha, it really kind of messed with my mind a little bit. I remember watching Requiem for a Dream and did not know what the movie was about, and I just heard it was good, and it really turned me off on a lot of things. It just really kind of messed me up, and I think I just sat in my room and just contemplated just everything. I really just looked at everything and was like, wow, I can't believe someone can make this piece of work and it can affect me so much. So I definitely had that same sort of approach. And then Black Swan came out, and I think it was Mila Kunis and what's her name?
Natalie Portman.
Thank you. That was a great movie, like very like suspenseful, and it was also about like the a dance, and it's like not the opera, but it's also like a ballet, and that had a lot more sort of emotion into it, but that was also kind of put on literally a stage. So I was really excited when I heard that he was directing this movie, but of course I don't watch the trailers. So I think my initial sort of thoughts were, what? And it was it was kind of tough to really. I think me and Mocha sat there and like was really trying his hardest, and we were walking to a bar, and we were really trying our hardest to really try to figure out what the movie was about. But we're gonna get into our like you said, post spoilers in a second. But overall, while watching the movie, I did. Like, the one thing I would say for it is I wanted to finish this movie because I needed to know exactly what was happening. So for anything, it definitely was kind of gripping, and it really was very entertaining, and I kind of wanted to know how the story would end. So that was definitely kind of a positive for the movie itself. So we're going to give you a quick commercial break, and then we're going to do a small intermission, and then we're going to go into a completely post-spoilers, get into all the nitty-gritty of Darren Aronofsky's Mother. See you soon.
Hey guys, a gypsy woman gave me a crystal yesterday.
And we are back, and thank you for joining us in the Down in Front podcast crew for our entire post-spoiler review of Mother, directed by Darren Aronofsky, stars Jennifer Lawrence, Michelle Pfeiffer, Javier Bardem, Ed Harris, and a bunch of people. I'm going to toss the reins over to my favorite fan in the world, Brylan. Get us started off. Some things that you enjoyed about Mother, and some things that you were digging.
Yeah, one thing I really love about this movie is it's definitely a Darren Aronofsky film. From the very first scene that you see, he kind of just says, "Hey, I'm gonna fuck with your mind," with Javier Bardem putting the crystal on the little pedestal, and then the burnt out house becoming a normal house, and then we see Jennifer Lawrence, and it's really cool to see just how he does his best to fuck with your mind through the whole movie, especially when it comes to that final third after the sex scene and Jennifer Lawrence gets pregnant. Just that whole cascade of just craziness that happens that goes through just like a stair step of pretty much like, hey, someone may like me for the work I do, to, oh, a lot of people like me for the work I do, to, oh, shit, people are starting to worship me. That whole elevation of fandom, but also becoming ideologies, mm-hmm. I think is done fantastically well. I also want to say I really like Michelle Pfeiffer in this film. I think she's the best when she's kind of like a mouthy, vindictive bitch. And she has some really good scenes, especially with Jennifer Lawrence, about like kind of coaching her through what she needs to do to be a wife, especially when she has an older husband. There's a whole scene when they're talking, when they're washing clothes. She's like, really, you got to like jazz this up if you're going to get his attention and stuff. And I thought she played that role very well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I disagree with you a little bit. She didn't do a bad job there, but she didn't really stand out for me in any way. And you're not alone. There's I was reading reviews after going to see it, where they were a lot of people were specifically calling out. I just couldn't see it. It wasn't anything special to me. She played a part, she played it well, but it wasn't like transcendent.
Yeah, I think to me, what it is that she's such a different dynamic to what Jennifer Lawrence was putting on the screen. That she had a lot of volatile emotion, and that even after you meet her husband, who's like this nice, pleasant guy, that you find the unfortunate scenario that he's dying, that she accepts that, but she still is going to kind of live her life the way she sees fit, no matter what happens. And I think it's a really multi-level character that's in the movie, even though she's in there very briefly. But I have to say, probably the best thing about this movie is America's Sweetheart, Javier Bardem. He is probably one of the best fucking actors working right now. And it's amazing to see him. He's an actor that he could be the most vicious guy in the room. He could also be the most charming guy in the room. And you get a lot of that in this movie. You get all elements of, I think, what Javier Bardem is to acting. And you get to see him be very a calming presence during a lot of grief, during the funeral scene for Ed Harris's son. You get to see him be violent as hell when the crystal breaks. You get to see him be kind of naive and beloved during the whole chaos reigning scenes. And man, I think his power on the screen is just fantastic and phenomenal. And one last thing I liked about this movie, I liked that even though Darren Aronfsky might have his own interpretation of this film, that it is open for interpretation. That you're going to take this movie out away from you the way you feel you wanted to. You're either going to be absolutely confused, or you're going to take a few moments to think about, okay, what did I just see, and come to a conclusion based on that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely kind of echoing some of these thoughts, Brylan. I do enjoy the suspensefulness of the movie itself. It was very intense. It was a thriller. It was there weren't any kind of jump scares, but I think that they may have been a couple kind of weird things that's happening, and you can see that it was an embodiment of the house and how that she was kind of feeling a particular kind of time frame. You could see that the house was actually kind of dying. It was physically kind of breaking down, and the house was kind of bleeding and kind of leading her different places. And there was just a lot of imagery, and there's a lot of pieces in the set design that I just thoroughly sort of enjoyed. I just like some of these images that was being portrayed and was happening of Jennifer Lawrence's mother woman character. I thoroughly enjoyed a bit of I can't even call it random. I just love how there are certain people the entire Ed Harris and Donald Gleason and Michelle Pfeiffer that their entire. There's another guy but he's a no-name actor, right? Spoiler, he dies, so he's a no-name actor when that happens, right? But that entire sort of family conflict, and it really kind of speaks pretty high of other people's family conflict. Sometimes kind of gets involved in yours, and you're trying to help, but it doesn't necessarily kind of work. And I think that Aronofsky was necessarily making a statement from there, and I just love how crazy that ramped up really quickly, just from we're trying to he thought this was the Airbnb, or what we're gonna do is just kick him out. And I love Ed Harris in that moment, in that scene. He just kind of just randomly, he was basically just playing himself, which I just love Ed Harris anyway. But it really come with, you got a stranger, and then we're not entirely sure, then you get another stranger, and we're not entirely sure, then you get this whole backstory, and the backstory that we got, you actually heard sprinkles of it, so you can see that storyline kind of ramp up really quickly, and they're side characters, right? And then at the same time, the mother, or Jennifer Lawrence's character, is trying to process exactly what's happening, and then it just ramps up to the point where it kind of culminates in the death of the child, of her child, the grown son. So I do enjoy that. There was a lot of moments that I was just completely hooked and just on board of just kind of focusing on, and I kind of listening and just seeing those moments in screen, especially the entire chaotic sort of moment at the end of you have a room that's basically kind of spinning around, and just about each and every shot is a different locale. It gets crazier and crazier with explosions and tanks, and there's one part there's Russian people and people were in cages. It was absolutely sort of ridiculous. So I do like that. It really kind of kind of speaks to a lot of like there's a lot of weird sort of absurdist theater pieces of just like at one point there is no God and it's all sort of chaos, and that really felt that way at the end of this movie. Mocha, what you got?
Yeah, this film, it's a good thing we break things down in order to let us focus on the positives and the criticism separate, just because I feel like with a lot of people, it's easy to get swept up into things that make you uncomfortable but in this film. But I think as far as good things go, like a few of you had mentioned, the acting, I think, is pretty great through and through. I think that the actors were only given so much to work with, but I absolutely loved Javier Bardem throughout every minute of it. Michelle Pfeiffer can still absolutely bring it to the screen in terms of selling a character, as well as just looking absolutely incredible for a 59-year-old person. Jennifer Lawrence, for someone who I've typically seen in more action-oriented, dynamic, I'm the loud heroine roles, was able to pull off this soft-spoken, somewhat shy, not in control of her life individual in a way that I hadn't seen her perform on screen before, which I thought takes a good amount of effort. All around, I think that everyone who showed their face in this film did a pretty good job. The movie was also beautifully shot. Regardless of what flaws it was beautiful. The set was fantastic. That house is like, if I died and went to heaven, I imagine that's the house that I would be given, despite all my bad deeds on earth. But it was absolutely beautiful. The fact that the entire movie took place within the house and never exited the house in any sort of meaningful way gave this really cool sense where it almost felt like I was watching a play at times. As like the backgrounds which in the house would change, but only with the camera movement. A lot of times the camera was really focused close in the face, and that also gave the sense that while the audience was looking in one direction, there were stagehands changing the scenery on the other side of the stage, so that when it cut back, it looked different, and back and forth. So there was this cool dynamic going on there.
They really sell up the idea of the house as a character, and like for the most part, the camera is focused and fixed on Jennifer Lawrence, and it gives you that sense of that the house is moving around her rather than she's moving around in the house. And I think, and plus the whole heartbeat thing of the house, I think is a very unique way of just kind of symbolizing that she's kind of grounded in earth as well.
Yeah. They also did a really good job, as you mentioned. Most of the time, the camera is focused on Jennifer Lawrence, and in particular, whenever there are stressful moments on the screen, which winds up just being the last half of the movie on. The camera just like holds really tight to Jennifer Lawrence's face, and it does this really good job of sort of grafting the audience to the emotional state of the mother character, where we're seeing the world. She's experiencing the world changing around her as she goes, and the audience is only seeing that through her eyes, almost as if it was over her shoulder. So we get connected to her, and we experience that claustrophobia that she feels from being surrounded by people, and we experience that almost psychotic panic she gets from seeing something new every time she turns around as the movie ramps up. And I thought that the camera work did a really good job of connecting the audience with those emotions, which I think was just really, really effective. Also, for the most part, this movie was pretty simply shot. It was mostly practical effects, but when there were special effects, they were just beautiful and really well integrated into the movie. In the beginning and at the end, when the house heals itself from its burnt state, the veins of fire in the crystal that are just like really ever so gently pulsating and look like as if they're streams of lava. When Mother is having her contractions as she scrambles through the house, and with every contraction, the entire screen shakes and the outer edges of the screen sort of blur out. The special effects were just really cool and never really felt like they dominated the film or took me out of the practicality of the majority of what it was built upon. And also, I have to give a big shout out to this movie. It's really hard to disturb me when it comes to both fiction films and even, like real videos of shitty things happening. I am a child of the internet. I grew up watching videos from websites like eBaum's World and WorldStar and Lord knows all sorts of like explicit places. So I've seen some shit, and it takes a lot to make me feel really uncomfortable. And the scene where the baby is crowd surfing and suddenly gets his neck snapped just rocked me. It just really, really made me uncomfortable. Personally, I find that anything dealing with harming a baby really upsets me, no matter how fake or fictitious it is. And up until this moment, the most disturbing scene in any movie I had seen was the scene in Trainspotting, where Ewan McGregor's character comes out of his bender and goes to check on the baby and realizes that it's been days or even possibly weeks, and the baby is just in bed, dead and moldy. That was the most disturbing scene I had seen in the film, and I think the baby neck snap, followed by the butchered corpse and the people like pushing his little body parts into their mouth with their fingertips, might top that in terms of things that really disturbed me in a movie, and that is a positive.
You heard it here first, folks. Baby killing, a positive in Mike's mind.
God damn it. There goes my run for governor.
Bullet, what's up?
So I got a couple things. I thought this was the original point of the film, based on the it being named Mother, was to be an abstract on like young women's life growing up current day. I thought that they did a lot of things where, like, they were really, as someone who's in my late 20s, most of the people are, that would do this, like, are generally in this age range. There's a ton of pressure to be like, when you have a kid, you should have a kid. You don't really know what life is until you have a kid. And, like, that was so over, like, that was, to me, the right level of right there. That, like, it made sense on a personal level, and then it also had a little bit of, like, not coming out and saying this is the point of the movie. I also thought it was funny on the flip side where when they had, like, the funeral party, and she was just yelling at everyone, trying to clean up after them. All I could see was my own mother chasing me and my friends around the house, being like, "Get down from there! No! You're making a mark!" Like, and so I really thought it was funny how they showed perfectly the mess that people Jennifer Lawrence is, I think, a year younger than me's age reach, where like half of us are stuck with our parents and grandparents going like, when are we going to have, when are you going to pop out a couple kids? And another half have a couple kids, and they're stuck, like, yelling at them because they're all tiny and little terrors that I want no part of. I thought that was a really, like, solidly well explored for a little bit in that movie, and I thought it really worked. I think that it partially because it worked, because I thought a lot of the small character scenes had a ton of great chemistry. Like, some of the dialogue didn't work, and it was kind of goofy, and like the Man in Black kind of was shoehorned in a little bit, but the lines between Lawrence and Javier Bardem I thought were like really well done, and I think that deserves like pointing out. And again, it goes to like, a lot of the small scenes was when they really focused on like the motherly aspect of things. One thing that kind of helped draw it into how close and personal it was that it had a lack of music. So apparently there was a score written for this, and then they decided, hey, the score's not really what we want. Let's just strip it down. And this is the composer that came and was like, hey, like, I don't think anything I wrote makes sense. We'll just get rid of it and we'll do our own thing. So what they did to compensate is they overly boosted a lot of the sound design elements, floorboards creaking, pots and pans rattling. And so you could really hear that. You could really hear with a fine detail what was going on throughout the house. Like you guys were talking about earlier, the house was a living embodiment that had its own lines and its own dialogue that you firmly was in the foreground.
Yeah, like whenever she poured that yellow thing into her drink, you'd hear like this
the fizz
big sound and fizz.
Yeah,
also like it was like a fizz plus.
Yeah. So, and it really drew you in on those. They kind of, I felt like, lost their way a little bit when they started introducing a lot of people to the mix. Because it was underscored, or, it overshadowed. Like, they had all the background noises. The one contrary thing that I love is that they built you up to listening to all these stupid background things, and then as soon as the people stopped talking when the baby was born, like, I noticed it. I was just like, where'd all that white noise go? This whole sound bed dropped away because they've been doing it the entire rest of the movie. And you waited, an hour and 40 minutes for that payoff. That was definitely well worth it. That you had that little hanging moment of suspense. As one last thing, I want to shout this out. I flat out didn't notice the actress change, that it wasn't Jennifer Lawrence at the end. I was like positive that because in my head I kind of figured out some of these things beforehand. I really wasn't paying attention too much, and then when I went home, like, wait, what? I saw an extra person cast as some random role and clicked in on it. But yeah, those are the big things for me.
Well, even when the movie kind of started, like the woman who was burning at first was a different actress, and it was a different woman. And so so you started off as a different woman. Then you wake up and you get Jennifer Lawrence's character, and then we get the random character at the end. And I think that was a question that I think me and Mocha talked about, because I think I definitely picked up on it. I was like, oh, who's this person? And I thought we were going to figure out who this person was, and I thought this person was going to be the daughter, or the baby was born, but there's a son. So I was like, wait, who is this person going to be? And then we ended up saying, oh, okay, it's like a cycle. And that's very interesting there.
No. Yeah, some things will be a little bit different, but the process stays the same.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as always, things that we like about this movie, but there's also going to be a lot of stuff and a lot of things that we may not necessarily like about movies in general. And I'm going to toss this over the book.
Cool. Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me was that, like, I couldn't figure out the point of this movie through the whole first half of it. And then at some point, I was like, yeah, it's all a Bible metaphor. It's all Jesus. That's all this is about. And there's no ambiguity whatsoever. I don't know. It to me, that didn't work, where it didn't play that fine line between presenting an ambiguous idea and making it too ambiguous, or presenting an idea and then having everyone understand it immediately. Like, it felt like everyone walking out was like, oh, that was about God and about the environment, and people kind of suck, and people have war. Oh, okay, cool. Like, I've seen that in a million movies, and I've seen it presented in more of an ambiguous side, where, like, you can see why people do certain activities. In this aspect, it was just like, well, Javier Bardem's acting irrationally, and he's supposed to be this all-knowing thing, and the crowds are acting completely irrationally. Like, I get it. That's the take of, like, how humanity works. But on, like, that intermediate level, like, no one acts like that. Like, I think that as a culture, there's a few people that have the voice on the internet and Fox News that have very loud voices and are able to kind of dictate a dialogue. But in most cases, if you talk to the common person, that's not what anyone's like. And I thought it was just kind of overblown, and, like, it was too cute. It was too much of, like, hey, this is my statement on society, rather than, like, making something subtler that it actually means something to everyone. Also, I thought there was some things like the yellow powder, which we were talking about before, even the contractions that were presented but just never explained. And, like, they seemed kind of meaningful. Like, the contractions for me, what?
Well, I was just going to say that I can explain contractions to you. You see, when a woman is nearing her birthing point...
I understand the notions on how that works, but it seemed like she was having this, like, really powerful... it was, like you were saying earlier, it was one of the, like, they actually used...
Messianic force.
Yeah, and, like, you kind of expected, like, I don't know, something. Like, something about the baby was kind of important, and in the end, the baby just proved as a plot device to get her to hate God and then go to a basement and kill everyone.
The most important thing about the baby was that it tasted delicious.
That's very true.
At least you're consistent about this.
I thought there was great Foley work for it. So.
Oh yeah. They broke a whole bunch of different animal bones in there trying to get that thing sounding right. One last thing for me is that, like, in kind of going into this, that even from the opening moments, I was like, oh, this is a time loop and nothing matters. As I was saying earlier, they did fool me on the whole actress thing. But it was still like, okay, pretty blonde woman gets burned up, pretty blonde woman wakes up. And I thought personally that we saw the end of the movie there, and I thought it was just going to go cycle back to the beginning again with Jennifer Lawrence. But still, it was a time loop. The other thing is that if you read both the, was it The Telltale Heart by Edgar, was it Poe who wrote that?
Yeah.
With the whole thing with the hearts beating inside the house, I was like, well, it's her heart, like as soon as we saw that, and in fact, as soon as we saw the first shriveling of it, I was like, well, that's the crystal, like that's what he's been portraying, and like somehow that's how all this magic works, and that's what's kind of growing inside of her. And so like the reveals at the end when he goes in, rips it out of her chest wasn't that big, because it was like, well, yeah, that's what's going to go happen. In a movie like this where it's supposed to be ambiguous, like, I don't know, that was a big miss, because I felt like that could have been, like, if you didn't telegraph that from the start, it would have worked. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, in regards to the time loop, this is really great short story. I have no idea who wrote it, but I think it's worth for everyone to check out. In fact, if we can remember, which there's next to no chance of that happening, but if we can remember, we'll post it in the show notes, where it's the story where this guy wakes up and is presented with a deity, and the deity talks about his previous life and says, okay, you have to go live again. And then, like, I know you guys are laughing at me, but it's probably like sophomore level psychology, short story, but it's a really good one. And I think that it perfectly encapsulates that living experience that Jennifer Lawrence had throughout this whole thing, except it was done better in this random short story that was published on the internet.
Yeah, I kind of want to see like a sequel to this movie where does Javier Bardem make different choices, because I guess we're led to believe like he knows all the past histories of everything. And that,
well, he doesn't.
Will he try something different to be a little bit more connected to her, or will he just continue to be who he is?
I think you're not wrong there. It'd be interesting to see another take on another timeline. But I think at that point, he had that line, was it I am I? That you basically start every scenario from that wake-up moment, and you know that for a fact that that's a wake-up moment. And then you end every scenario with her burning the house down in some capacity. How you get there is irrelevant. And I think Javier, that's part of the intrigue of, and like kind of the sadness of his character, that he knows at some point, like regardless, that's gonna happen.
Well, in the biblical analogy or allegory, God is all-knowing, right? And so, for people like myself who were raised in Christian households and are still dealing with the trauma from that today, God knows, like when you sin, God knows you're going to sin because God knows you're shitty, and also God knows that you're going to sin again. And it's this sort of unavoidable thing where the creator creates, but the creation always has free will, even if the creation knows that it shouldn't be doing. And I think for Javier Bardem there, I think he's obviously supposed to be God in this scenario. And I think for him, the moment where he realizes that it's all going to have to be done over is when the crystal breaks. At that moment, he's so filled with rage because he's like, shit, it's happening again. They're going to fuck it up again. Yeah. And so from then on, he's just sort of writing it out until that moment where he has to restart.
The other thing is his primary obsession during the whole time.
Yeah.
Before that breaks, that's his primary obsession.
And it kind of switches where, like, after that moment, he goes into that depression, and then, my God, this is so... Did you guys catch, like, the Cain and Abel and, like, the Great Flood got rid of all... It's like, oh, God, it was so heavy-handed. But, I guess, ironically, but one thing is that, at least in the Christian God, at least the New Testament one, Jesus is super humble, and I guess if we never got to see the quote-unquote Jesus character, we don't know how that would go. And maybe some of our Jewish listeners can kind of fill us in from more the Old Testament side of things. I didn't think God was ever that kind of like a self-absorbed, egotistical prick. You know,
hell yeah, he was. The First Testament is all God being.
Really? It's been a while. It's been a while since I've seen that.
So the Old Testament is nothing but God being an asshole. And then the New Testament comes and Jesus shows up and it levels him out a bit.
Yeah, right. But they're supposed to be like the same. I don't know.
He's just like, sorry.
I'm sorry for the people that are like religious that are thinking like, nope, that's incorrect. This is not what we think. Because it's been about a decade plus since I've gone to Sunday school. But yeah, to me it seemed like a little bit out of character for that.
Yeah. I was raised Episcopalian, so we weren't taught Catholic guilt. So
lucky you.
Yeah,
I'm literally like unconsciously flogging myself as we record this, and I didn't even realize it until you mentioned the Catholic guilt. That's how real it is.
Oh, good Lord.
Oh man.
I'm going to toss this over to Brylan. What's some things that just didn't work for you for Mother?
So I think the big issue with this movie is Jennifer Lawrence. I think she's horribly miscast in this movie. I think at the very beginning when she's showing like this pragmatic side, so she's being welcoming to people. She's being a home for people. And then she has this unique take of like, oh, watch the sink, it's not braced, or oh, let me clean those dishes for you. And, you know, it's that very, like, domestication part of the home. But as the movie goes on, I feel like she just doesn't have the dramatic energy to keep up with a character like this. And I would like to have seen someone that, when they see their baby's neck get snapped, be able to create a blood-curdling scream that would jar me out of my seat. And he doesn't do that for me. It's very weak. It's like, no, my baby. And that's it. And I think this has she delivers one of the most cringy lines that after she sleeps with Javier Bardem, she goes, I'm pregnant. And it just comes off the wrong way with her. I think she's a good actor. I love Winter's Bone. She's amazing in that movie. But she's not right for this movie at all. And with all the things about, like, Darren Aronfsky said, like, this is kind of like a allusion to the Bible. I really didn't pick up on that. I was watching this. Like I said, I'm Episcopalian. We take the Bible at face value, pretty much. That the doctor's family and everything, these are some good characters. This is some good character building. I think it's very rushed and is there and gone away too quickly, especially with the brothers. I'd like to see more about why the brothers at odds ends, and it's kind of like you're introduced to them. They have their collision with each other, and then it's out of the way to make room for the greater madness. And I feel like let these characters stay a little bit and let them kind of be more connected to this world. I thought that would make the movie more interesting and make it less of a on-the-nose type of biblical reference as well.
Mocha, what you got?
Well, I have to agree with a lot of what Blue had said and what a lot of you guys have said as well so far. I think that this movie, in the moment, is nearly indecipherable, particularly when things take that, as I mentioned earlier, that sharp left-hand turn into chaos. It's really hard to kind of figure out what exactly they're going for. You know, this movie can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, and it sort of exclaims itself in all of those ways at once. And so not only is it a lot of visual and auditory stimuli on screen, but for anyone who goes into a movie and tries to look at it through a critical lens, it's way too many possibilities to process in the moment. And I feel like there might have been an intent there to allow people to sort of come to their own conclusion, but it doesn't really execute well. And even if I try to give it that much of a leeway, Aronofsky came out and said exactly what the movie was supposed to be about, too. So if he knows exactly what the movie is supposed to be about, then why didn't he make a movie that allows the audience to narrow in on exactly what it's supposed to be about?
Yeah.
Which is
he took the David Lynch approach with this movie.
Yeah. Although that's not as well executed, I think. The first half of the movie spent its time building towards what seems and what it was billed as a horror movie. It seems like a horror movie about home invasion, about somebody's control over a pristine rural life spinning out of control with these strangers who just won't get the fuck out and seem to have some sort of negative intentions. Michelle Pfeiffer was, despite Blewett's failings that she didn't really do much in this role, I thought that as a main antagonist, she was fantastic. She had this air of just being on the edge of exploding, right? Like, she was a loaded bomb and everything seemed fine, but you didn't know what she was going to do, including when she, just kind of slipped away from Jennifer Lawrence and ran into the holy room of the poet. But she wasn't the antagonist. She was just one of the notes in a tour of allegory through the Bible. And I feel like the movie really... It almost seemed like the main antagonist in the movie was the movie itself. And that's weird. It's a weird thing to have to come out of a movie thinking. And it's a bit too heavy-handed, as we mentioned earlier. There were a few moments in the movie that, again, did well within the framework of, this is a horror movie, but didn't really make sense from the grand picture of, this is some Bible allegory. The blood dripping through the floor and outlining the secret door that was being banged upon by some force from within, but that has nothing in it of any sort of value except for the oil tanker that she ultimately uses to light the house on fire. You can light the house on fire with pretty much anything as long as there's fire involved. So why was that?
There were a lot of fucking candles around the house at the
end. Yeah, there were a shit ton of candles. But that room should have had some sort of significance and meaning. I've been racking my brain trying to figure out what that stupid room could have meant from a biblical perspective. Warren, when you and I stepped out of the theater, the fucking frog drove me crazy.
Yeah.
Frog. So she opens the door, she finds the secret door, and one creature, the only form of life that we've seen that isn't human, jumps out, and it's a frog. What does that mean? It can't be random. There's no body of water in that little dark tanker room. Frogs tend to have a lot of different meanings, can be used in a lot of ways for symbolism. They're amphibious, so they have this representation of duality of nature, duality of mind and spirit. They are reptilian, so they have this sort of ancient quality that exists beyond time of humans. They were one of the major plagues.
Yeah,
they were one of the major plagues. If you want to look that way in biblical times, we have fairy tales about them, representing frog princes, and they have so much of a rich history of symbolism throughout all different types of cultures. But it was just a frog in this movie. It was a really, at most it was a jump scare, but not even. I don't know, that entire basement seems so pointless, which is really odd to me because the basement, the only person who ever steps into the basement is Mother. And while it's a room that builds fear and anxiety for the audience, it's always, for every moment that she's in it in the movie, the safest place for her. And so there's some inherent meaning there, but it actually has no connection to the greater allegory as far as I can see. That's maddening. Why did you waste the time on that? This movie was long enough as it was. Yeah. Why had the light bulb filled with blood and then pop? If everything else means something, why did that mean nothing? So that was a big point of frustration for me. I really think this movie would have been great as a straight up horror movie about home invasion, but it wasn't that at all.
Yep.
I think that this film was definitely one of the more abstract and surreal examples of Aronofsky's work. Especially out of what I've seen. I haven't seen The Fountain yet. I know that movie can get a bit out there. But I also feel like he's trying really hard to make this his most abstract and surreal work. And what I like about Aronofsky's other movies is that there's always a very clear amount of intent and a clear amount of thoughts into how it's filmed and what the characters do and say and what the music sounds like. to get a specific effect while being relatively subtle. This film just didn't feel like it had that. It didn't have some of the messages that you see in films like Black Swan or in The Wrestler or in Requiem for a Dream. It was almost as if
movies, their fear is more of the upfront human elements of it and not the fantastical, even though you see the fantastical there to add to the horrors of the real. It's like, instead of the wings sprouting from bulging out of her back and creating blood and stuff, it's more of her torturing her ass to actually get this part. That's the fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could almost see that with the first part of the movie. The first half of the movie gives off this sense of the fear being people who are willing to just take and be selfish, the selfishness of humanity, when you're looking at somebody who is inherently giving, inherently caring, inherently mother-like to everyone she meets, and what that means when people come into your life that are just willing to take no matter what it means to you. That was there, and then suddenly the second half of the movie starts, and none of that matters because it's all just this crazy fever dream. It was just like, I feel like the first half of this movie had way more potential and lined up with what it was billed as in the trailers than the rest of the second half of the movie. And the second half of the movie dictates the significance of the first half in this instance. So I feel like it was a negative bait and switch. Like they lured me in with a good movie and then swapped it out for nonsense.
Because that trailer was fucking amazing that they released.
Oh yeah, and I was telling Warren about this when we were in the movies initially. The first time I saw a trailer for Mother, the trailer was shown in theater with no visual whatsoever. It was a black screen, all of the audio from the original trailer, but just with the words flash on the screen of like who the actors were, who was creatively involved, and then the title. And that sold me. I was like, hell yes, this movie looks like it's going to be awesome. And then the trailers added to that. The trailers, even with their visual elements, led me to think, this is going to be creepy and scary and cool. And it just was a different type of movie. I don't know. It's a shame because I do love Aronofsky's work, and I like being challenged by him. And I don't think this movie was really challenging. I think it was just confusing. That's more or less what I have on it. Those topics are kind of the umbrella that all my negativity rests on, or all my criticism rest under for this film.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely kind of agree with literally just about every part. It's more along the lines of Mocha, because we did talk about this in depth a lot, and we even kind of brought it up and kind of talk about with like other people who had like a different perspective of it. And I guess like the biggest thing that I would necessarily say is just I was just very confused, because I didn't get any of the biblical references at all. That's why I haven't chimed in on that, because I did not know half of that stuff. So I'm like, okay, well, I didn't get any of that at all. Like, maybe you want to tell a story about relationships or like marriage and like people growing old together, or like the inability to grow old, or like the challenges of marriage, or then much like I think Mocha kind of talked about, like maybe you want to talk about like this guy's an artist, right? And you talk about the internet trolling and how things in creative process on the internet and anybody and everybody can necessarily kind of talk about it, or maybe you want to talk about like you said, kind of the home invasion. Like there's, once you already past maybe you want to talk about number 3, number 4, it's not a good sign. And then you outright tell everybody, oh no, this is what the movie's about, and nobody had gotten that at all. Or not nobody. Some people did pick up on it, and you can see some articles that people wrote about it who actually really enjoyed and really loved this movie. But I just had a bit of an issue with things that weren't explained, like what was she drinking, and why was that always coming up in times that she couldn't defend herself or kind of speak up for herself, and that was kind of weird. And it's just a lot. I'm not going to retread on what people said here, but it's just too many things. Too many things that just cause too much issues for the movies, and we know that he can make a movie that's like linear, that can necessarily make from A to B to C, but he chose to do it a completely different sort of roundabout sort of way, and it just didn't hit on a lot of points. There was too many sort of open-ended sort of things that happened to it. Now, at one point, I felt more for the side family of the leaving somebody out of his will and he's dying and all like everybody else. I felt like that was a more entertaining movie, what was happening, like a section of the movie than the actual main character, which was not good. It's definitely not a good thing to actually have, and it's just kind of weird for what they were necessarily trying to do, what they're trying to approach.
I think some of the cameos are just weird as hell as well, because it's like, you don't see Kristen Wiig as playing like his agent. You see, it's SNL's Kristen Wiig. And what is she doing here? Yeah. And so she goes about and says like, we need to get you out there and promote you. And by the end, she's like shooting people in the head that disagree with his vision and stuff. And it's just like very like, you know what? You could have had a bit more subtle hand into what you wanted your interpretation to be and still make a great movie, because Aronofsky's been a king of subtlety. I mean, look at The Wrestler. The Wrestler has a lot of different motifs to it, but in the end, it is about one guy just trying to see, like, can he lead a normal life, and he ultimately decides he can't.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing about Kristen Wiig's cameo in this and that, I agree with you there. If I see Kristen Wiig, the first thing I think of is, this is SNL's Kristen Wiig. However, I do think that she's capable of transforming herself in a more serious role. But in this film, she didn't have the opportunity to. She showed up. The audience goes, literally no one was expecting Kristen Wiig. And then rather than developing her character or giving her any sort of actual meaning or any sort of purpose to be in the film at all, they just use her for a few like quick shots to show that there's another voice kind of hyping up the creator, separating him from his wife and the things that should matter to him. And then she's taken out of the screen. And so you don't get a chance to see her really dive into a character that means anything. You just see Kristen Wiig in 4 to 5 shots. And I don't think that's Kristen's fault. I think that's the character, and I think that's the directing's fault.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other thing I thought was kind of strange of like things not necessarily adding up is they called the police like multiple times and they never showed. And why was like the use of a phone and like calling for help or anything wasn't necessarily sort of like they mentioned it in particular of, hey, there's no cell phone service, what you were kind of talking about before, but it just also doesn't make any sense. There's just so much. I don't feel like chatting on the movie here. Like, it's just, there's too many things that just didn't necessarily.
A lot of convenience.
Yeah. But alright, guys. So, I'm super pumped to talk about our grades. And kind of ending off of, we're here, we're going to talk about our final grades, and we're going to toss it over. Brylan, give me some final grades and some lasting thoughts of Mother.
So I'm going to give it a C+. This is, Aronofsky, he's visual genius, what he wants to be, but like a lot of what people said, it's very heavy-handed in its telling and what he wants to get across it. And he's definitely made better movies than this. And I'm going to go back and say, like, hey, the best reason to see this movie is to see Javier Bardem, go ham on acting and just run a clinic on what it is to be an actor. The dude is fucking amazing. Yeah. And I would see it again just for his performance.
Oof. That is some bold words, my friend. So I got Bradley C+ Mocha. What you got?
This movie is going to receive a C+ from me. Up until maybe like 20, 30 minutes ago, I was planning on giving this movie a bit of leeway and offering it a B-. But talking about it and verbalizing my thoughts, which I really hadn't had a chance to do since I saw the movie, helped me realize just how fucking frustrated I really was coming out of that movie theater. I think there was a bit of shock factor, not in, this movie was shocking, but more that I am experiencing traumatic shock afterwards, because I really just trusted Aronofsky to just blow me away with this film. And I was so excited for it to be the first time that I saw an Aronofsky film in theaters. And it just wasn't up to par with his previous stuff, and I think he got a little over ambitious with what he thought he could pull off in this one scenario. It's definitely a movie that warrants multiple viewings, but I do not believe any of those viewings should be in the theater. Do not spend money for a ticket to see this film. Watch it when it releases on digital, with your friends or with a loved one, so that you have someone to talk about it with afterwards. Don't watch this movie alone, not because it's scary, but because you will need to talk through your own frustrations.
Yes.
And it's not healthy to push that stuff down. This is coming from a former Catholic. Don't push it down. That's unhealthy. But yeah, ultimately, this movie is getting a C+.
I give this movie a D+. Honestly, the entire movie, I just kept on thinking, please get to the point, please get to the point, please get to the point. And then when I did, I was like, what's going on with this? It also didn't help that I had a big gulp right before it, and I had to pee through the entire movie. Which
always a terrible feeling.
Yeah, but truthfully, I'll give it this. I saw Dark Knight Rises, and I did the same stupid thing, and I sat there and I suffered through that. And that movie wasn't terribly great. It was good. It was very good, but it wasn't a great movie. Mm-hmm. And I still was like, well, I want to find out what happens next. I want to find out what happens next. With this, I was just like, oh my God, I should just go pee. I don't care. And that, you should never have a movie that you have in theaters where you're thinking that sentence to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of too stuck up its ass. I'll probably just never see this film again. It wasn't a failure. It wasn't Transformers level bad. Ugh. But I have no reason. Yeah, right.
I can't fail this movie. That's not possible. So I think my grade here is going to be bordering a C to C minus, but I'll stick to a regular C. I did like the things that I like, set design and the way that they necessarily had and the shots of the film, and even some of the colors that they were necessarily kind of using, especially when, although we don't know what this powder is, but this powder essentially is supposed to be make everything sort of better. And I did have one thing of, well, maybe it's just regular magic. Is it about medication, opioid use or something like that, of gets people to something that they want to kind of just use and makes everything feel better. So she can see her, the first time we actually see her do it is put her in the paint. And then we see her drink it. So now we have no fucking idea what this is. But it did, she put it on the wall, and it was oh, that made it better. And there's these small moments in the movie that I think are interesting that I think he had an idea for, but forgot. I don't know.
Yeah. I was wondering about that, too. I was like, is that the same stuff?
Yeah, it has to be the same.
I
thought it was the same
I was
stuff.
yeah. That's so fucking weird.
And maybe maybe that stuff that they were sprinkling, it could be, right? It's probably not, but maybe that stuff is maybe ashes of how she's trying to actually sort of destroy everything. When one of her things says that she's trying to create and build a new house and fix this all up, but maybe every time she does that, she's slowly kind of destroying stuff. Who knows? I don't know, but we needed to have a reason for that, and we just didn't have a reasoning for it. So I guess all the stuff that we necessarily said, it was just too confusing. I think once we left the movie, it's not a good sign when I can't tell if I dislike the movie or just still kind of confused, or I need to talk this out just to even figure out what the heck did I see. But already I know that I off the bat, I know I didn't like this movie, and that's a bad sign. So let's see, it's going to be my final grade for Mother.
Brutal.
So thank you, everyone, all my beautiful fans, all our beautiful people listening, all the Derek Sungs and the Ryan Dows in the world, and the Megan Arnolds, for listening to our Down in Front podcast featuring Mother, directed by Darren Aronfsky. Bradley, where can you find more of your work?
You can find me taking 20 months to write one poem at Twitter, at Brylan, B-R-I-L-U-N-D. I also host the Gamescast. We're going to be back very soon. Twitch.tv/Down-in-Front-Podcast. And you can also find my short movie reviews on Instagrams. I am Bryland. All one crazy with open spaces for the Instagram.
All right, and as always, I always excited to see your beautiful face. Mocha, where can you find more of your work?
Yeah, Well, you can, as always, find me on twitter.com, tweeting about all sorts of things, from current events to my general nonsense musings. My username is @MochaMikeLI, as the Lord intended. Unfortunately, I do not have the username @MochaMike, and that's because an older man continuously on a loop rips it out of my heart and puts it on a fucking pedestal and just stares at it. He does nothing with it. He just looks at it because it makes him feel good and keeps it away from me. So you cannot find me at @MochaMike. It is @MochaMikeLI. However, please also follow me on Instagram, where you can see my photography work. That is MochaMike, my username there, Instagram.com/MochaMike. You can also find some of my written work on Medium, where I do some long-form reviews about the films that we review here on the podcast, as well as talk about other works at medium.com/@MochaMike. I'll be posting a sort of breakdown of the film Mother through sort of a biblical lens. I'm trying to line up the characters and the events that occur with Aronofsky's vision, just to give a frame of reference for people. So please check that out. Let me know if you like it. It's medium.com/@MochaMike.
Yeah, so if you want, you can check us out on at My News Music on most major platforms. We got a Facebook, we got a Twitter, we got an Instagram. We're playing a show at the start of next month. We're hoping to announce a holiday show for Halloween. So soon enough. So hopefully you can come get freaky with that. And then, obviously, if you want to reach out for Gmail, I'm widely available, like leg spread available, just a piece of crap. You can find me at Jesse Wren's Beating Heartbeat House at gmail.com.
Nice.
I would have gone with Jesse Wren Baby Eater at ymail.com, but...
Mocha, we are fine-tuning this. Just absolutely fine-tuning this process.
Yep.
And we are the Down in Front podcast. You can find a lot of our work. The majority is going to be our podcast. So literally any really popular sort of podcast sort of platform you do, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store, and the Stitcher, you can find more of our work. Just search for us at Down in Front Podcast. We have a Twitter. We have a freaking Facebook. We're going to be on Patreon. So our Twitter is @_DAFP. That's @_DAFP. Our Facebook is facebook.com/Down in Front Podcast. As well as our Patreon for just helping us out for just any of the fees and going to movies, kind of hanging out and kind of traveling together as much as we can so we can push more content. Definitely go ahead and find us at patreon.com/Down in Front Podcast. And if you do have any questions of future reviews or things that you want, or if you want to be on the show, feel free to email us, downinfrontpodcast@gmail.com. And with that, we are the crew, we are the team. Thanks so much for checking in, and we will see you soon for our next review.
Bye. Call your mother, tell her you love her.
Call your mother, tell her you love
Mother,
her.
there is no other.